Hi Danica, how are you?
Good, thank you.
That's great. I just want to thank you today for coming in and contributing towards today's validation session. What we're going to look at is 2 units from a Certificate 3 in Customer Contact is BSB 30211, and the units in question are BSB CMM 301, Process Customer Complaints, and BSB CUS 301, Deliver and Monitor a Service to Customers. The date of validation is today, the 15th of April 2016, and the persons involved in this session is myself, Dara Cribben, and you, Danica Marico. Okay? The purpose of this validation session is to identify any gaps between the assessment tools and the benchmarks as outlined in the units of competency. Alright? Okay. Before we start dissecting the assessments and the tools, we need to keep in mind that competency-based assessments is the process of gathering sufficient evidence. And there's 4 principles of assessment, which is valid, which means that the assessment meets the required skills and knowledge. Reliable, meaning that there is consistency in the assessment so that another assessor would make the same decision if they were using the same assessment tools. Okay. Another one would be fair, meaning that the assessment process does not disadvantage or discriminate against any individual. And finally, that they're flexible, meaning that the assessment can be adjusted or used in a way that can meet the client or the learner's needs. Okay? And the path that we're going to take today is to look at the assessment tools and see if they're sufficient for gathering evidence and try to identify any areas that needs improvement. The tools that we have, I've emailed them to you last week so we could have a time to have a look over them before we have the session today. We have our learner observation checklist here, we have our customer contact assessment plan, we have the instructions for the assessor, we have the customer contact, we have assessments A, B and C. We also have the assessment marking guide, and we also have with us an assessment tool validation checklist which we'll fill out later on. And we also have the ABMN assessment validation outcome form, which we just fill out at the end basically to document our findings. With these tools, I've also printed off the 2 units of competency so we can match what we want to do off the performance criteria or the benchmarks here to make sure everything fits. Okay? Now what we're going to do is review each assessment tool and discuss whether or not they are sufficient for gathering evidence. Okay? The first tool that we're going to look at is the assessment plan, which is here. Now I've had a look at this during the week, and what the assessment plan is going to tell us what all the assessments are and where they have met the different performance criteria here in both of the assessments. And now when I've gone through all of these, they seem to address all of our performance ones. So as you can see here with the written questions and answers, it says it covers in the BSB CUS 301B. Here it shows that, for example, in task A, written questions and answers, it covers 1.4, 2.4 and 2.5, which is identify limitations in addressing customer needs and seek appropriate assistance from designated individuals, provide assistance or respond to customers with specific needs according to the organisational and legislative requirements, and identify use available opportunities to promote enhanced services and products to customers. Now as you can see, I've gone through it and everything seems to match with all the assessments from A through to E. Okay, I think we can move on and start looking at the assessments themselves to ensure they do cover these benchmarks. Alright. While we're doing this, we're going to look at the assessor's instructions to make sure that they're easily understandable. So it's like for the assessor, it's not just for me as the assessor, but it will also be for other assessors if they were going to use the assessments again.
Yeah.
Okay. So looking at assessment A, this is a written assessment containing 10 questions. The assessor's instructions themselves, which are all here, as you can see when we have them here, they do meet the assessment and they seem to be fairly easily understandable. It gives instructions of what the assessor must explain to the student at the commencement of the exam. Okay. What we do notice though is that the student's instructions do seem a little bit vague. Compare that to the assessor's. The student's instructions have only got 3 lines here, while the assessor has a lot more information. I think it should outline that the student is required to work without resources and discussion, which is, it's said here, but it's not said here in the student's task. One thing I've also noticed as well is that all of the units here for the examinations, they actually don't have the course code or any of this on the assessments, which really needs to be put on it so it's easy for the marker to go when they do the correcting. They can see, okay, that's part of this course or this unit, and I can correct it to the standard. The assessment itself asks the students to explain why the following requirements are good for customer contact effectiveness, okay? And then you're given 10 headings here where they have to write at least 2 points in each category and explain what they are. Most of the headings here are good. You know, they will match to what we're looking for.
Yeah.
But I think themselves, they don't provide enough evidence. Is 2 points enough? I don't think so. I think there could be a few extra headings that are put into the assessment, such as product knowledge, user initiative, and seeking feedback from the customers. I think that if we're adding these, will help support the student while touching on other benchmarks which were not highlighted in the assessment plan. Okay?
Yeah.
What do you think, Danica?
Yeah, I agree, Dara. I also think that the students should give like 3 to 4 points, so as to reinforce their answers.
Yeah. So we'll move on then to assessment B, which is, sorry, now I'm losing my assessment task B is here. So this is a role play scenario where the student is required to take an incoming call from a company member. There's a discrepancy between these. I seem to see there is a discrepancy between the instructions between the assessor and the student. The instructions for the assessor states that the student has 15 minutes to complete the exercise, while the student's instructions state that they have 30 minutes. So this is something that needs to be addressed. Is it a case that it's saying to the assessor that you tell the students when there's 15 minutes left in the examination, or is that they just have 15 minutes full stop? So this is something that just needs to be basically put in black and white and is easily understandable for both the student and the assessor, so there's going to be no confusion on the day of the test. As you can see, the student's instructions do match that of the observation checklist. Again, there are a few things that could be added, such as seeking customer feedback, identify and use available opportunities to promote products and services to customers. You know, they could get them questions directly from our elements and performance criteria and put them straight into our questions, or basically so the student can give their evidence. This will just reinforce the student's demonstration while touching on other parts of the performance criteria. So do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
It's like the more evidence the student provides, it will make it easier for the assessor to deem them as competent. Sometimes the students will always may have the knowledge, but they might lack the skills in executing them, and an assessor should ensure that the student can confidently do both of these tasks. Alright, it's not about making the assessment more difficult, but rather using every opportunity to gain evidence. Okay? We can move on to task C, which is it's another role play scenario where the student is asked to deal with the customer complaint. So, as with assessment B, there is a difference between the instructions between the students and the assessor. The student's instructor says that they have an hour to complete the exercise, while the assessor's instructions again says it's 15 minutes. So I'm assuming now at this stage that it's telling the instructor to remind the student when they have 15 minutes left in the examination. But I definitely think that this is something that should be put into the instructions for the assessor, is to tell them at the commencement of the exam that they have an hour. The observation checklist, again, it matches the student instructions. The assessment itself, it could incorporate a part where a solution cannot be found, as it would allow the student to provide evidence to another item within the performance criteria. Okay. This role play is great for addressing both units, but the students should be asked to demonstrate a bit more of their skills, such as provide assistance or respond to customers with specific needs. Seek customer feedback. Again, like I've thrown this in 2 or 3 times, but it's, again, the more we get, the better. And then assess customer needs for urgency to determine priorities for service delivery according to organisational and legislative requirements. Alright? We think that once the student has finished the role play, they should write a report and addressing some of the other benchmarks in the performance criteria. Basically, some of their own personal findings of what they thought of the role play scenario. So they could maybe address some other parts which may not have been brought up in the role play, but they can address it themselves at the end.
Yep.
It's also, in both of these, we want to see if the learner can document what happened in these scenarios and stuff, so it actually goes hand in hand.
Yep.
Okay. When we look at assessments D and E, when you look at it in the instructions for the assessor, again, it's pretty vague. Assessment D, it's the requirements for this task will be negotiated with the trainee and their supervisor. So it's fair enough, it's a diary task, but there should be some more instructions for the assessor, basically saying, look, this is what we need the student to provide. We need to actually be able to give the student information going, we want you to demonstrate this, we want you to demonstrate that, and basically have it in a diary. If you can put this all in a diary, then that's fantastic. We can be able to do it easier. It'll be the exact same thing with the sess, with assessment task E, with our written report.
Yep.
If we can give them if the assessor knows what they're looking for, we should be able to say it here and explain it for the assessor. So when they pick it up to do the assessment, they can go right and get straight into the assessment, so everybody's going to be on the same page. Okay? Now, looking back at everything, we should make sure we've covered everything in the assessment tools validation checklist. So, with the checklist here, it's just got a few little parts. We'll run through it quickly, and I reckon we should nearly have covered everything. Okay. So on the general part, the assessment tool, the assessment instrument, it clearly identifies the unit name, code, and training package. We found that it hasn't. So this is something I've ticked this off as no. What we'll do is we will fill it out properly at the end.
Yep.
But it's just so we can have an idea of what's going on. So it obviously doesn't. From looking at everything here, it needs to show what the units are, because if it's another assessor that's coming in, they'll have absolutely no idea what it's for or the purpose of it. If we can make sure that everything is basically got a paper trail, where it's easier to keep on top of everything. The next one then, assessment tools contain a mapping document. It's here in the assessment plan, and it shows the connection between the tools provided and how they meet the competency requirements. So you can see it here, performance criteria clearly states every part here, and we can map this onto our benchmarks.
Yep.
Okay. The assessment instruments provide clear instructions to the students. So we found it does give clear instructions, but I just found it doesn't give enough. Maybe just give the more information we can give the student, or we can give the assessor, the easier it's going to be for the assessment. And that's going to be the same in question 4. There's just a couple of discrepancies that need to be ironed out just to make sure that there's no confusion on the day. Okay? Then we look at validity, which is the assessment instrument enables the learner to demonstrate a level of skills and knowledge appropriate to the qualification level. I think it does.
Yeah.
The assessment tools are based on realistic workplace activities. So I think the main ones there would be your 2 role play scenarios. These are scenarios that they will be dealing with in real life, and we're actually going to be seeing how to deal with them. And also if we can explain the diary tasks and the written reports are also based on works and scenarios. Okay? If the required evidence relates directly to the unit of competency being assessed, it does. The assessment tools enable learners to demonstrate competency requirements more than once in varying contexts. So what we have found is that most of the assessments just seem to just do it once, where it seems to be like they'll ask the question and it's like, okay, they give one answer But the thing is that enough? Can we say that's enough evidence? And I think the answer really there is no, that maybe there should be more questions put in different parts, like the role play scenario or their questions, so we're going to see both their skills and their knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get both of them and tick both of them as yes, then we can say confidently that they're competent in this unit. Assessment tools enable the learner to demonstrate their competency over time. So their diary task, that would allow them over time. So they're going to be given X amount of time to do the task, so they could be able to do it maybe over 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever needs be. Perfect. Then we have reliability. So that's going over the tools itself. The assessment tools to support and ensure that assessors make consistent decisions over time with different students. I think it does when we've looked at all of them as a whole. There's a few gaps that we have pointed out. I think once we actually fill these little gaps in, it should be a pretty solid assessment.
Yep.
And if we move into flexibility, so the assessment approach can be adapted to meet the needs of all students. So it even says here in the customer plan that there is a reasonable adjustment for LLN, or for reasonable adjustment is allowed. So LLN requirements and adjustments to physical environment as required, so we can change it. So if somebody's got a disability or they've got difficulty reading, we can adjust the assessment so that they can answer it to their full potential.
Yeah.
Students are included in discussions on the choice of assessment methods and timing. This seems to be pretty fixed, this assessment, on what it is, so I think the answer here will be no.
Yeah.
Is it something that we can address? Is something that we can look at anyway? The student will be made aware of the responsibilities with regard to the assessment process. So as it says here with the instructor, with the information they're supposed to give the student at the start, they should be given a clear idea of what they're supposed to do at the start of every test. It did, I think in the assessment A, it did not say that the student had to work without talking to anybody else or using another source material. This needs to be put in so that the student is clearly knows that it is a sit-down test where they basically have to use their own knowledge. The assessment approach caters for language, literacy and numeracy, we've touched on that. The special geographic, financial or social needs of students have been considered in the development and conduct of the assessment. We'll see that the assessment is both a written and also workplace. I think it can be seen that it does cater for the students. So some of these assessments are based in work, so they're not actually going to be losing time outside of work where they were going to be working. They'd still be getting paid, but they're still able to do the report at the end and hand it to us for us to assess it for them. Reasonable adjustment can be made to assessment strategy to ensure equity for all students while maintaining the integrity of the assessment outcomes. I think the answer here is yes as well. Opportunities for feedback and review of all aspects of the assessment will be provided to the students. There doesn't seem to be much here about where we can provide feedback. This may be something that we should put down into the assessment, that we welcome some feedback at the end of the assessment. How did the student find it? Did they find it difficult, or did they find it too easy, or did we provide basically the right scenario or the right conditions for the student to do the test? If we're missing something, the only way we're going to find out we're doing wrong is if the student tells us.
Yeah.
Okay. Clearly documented mechanisms for appeal against assessment processes and decisions exist, and these will be provided to the student prior to the assessment. So there is absolutely nothing here explaining to the student that if they did fail for some reason, that they can appeal the decision, or if they felt that their assessment, that they did enough, but they feel like they were assessed maybe incorrectly. There's nothing here demonstrating that they can appeal that decision. Yeah. This is something that is going to need to be put in and documented, so we can say that to the students so that they know that if they feel that they were hard done by, that they can come and we can correct their exam. Okay. Then the assessment tools enable sufficient evidence to be gathered to meet all competency requirements. I think the answer is yes when you take into consideration that we're doing the written test, we're doing a role play scenario, we're doing a diary, so we're covering different aspects of an assessment. It's not just focused on one direction. Okay. The assessment tools enable evidence for sufficient quality to be gathered. I think, as we've seen, the answer is really no. I think it's not the assessments themselves. It just seems that there's not enough substance in them. It's just that we can add a few more things to them just to bulk them up. I think that's all that needs to be done here. Authenticity. Assessment tools ensure that the evidence gathered is the learner's own work. So I find that everything here is the written test and the role play scenario. They're going to be done underneath supervision, so we're going to know that the student is going to have done this on their own. When they're doing their work diary or their work report, this is going to be with their supervisor or their boss at work, so there is going to be somebody there to ensure that they are doing this work by themselves. So the answer there is yes. And then finally, the currency. The assessment tools ensure that the evidence collected is current and relevant. The answer is yes, because we've had a look at everything, and everything does seem to map back to our units of competency. And the assessment tools enable the learner to provide evidence of current skills and knowledge, which again, I think we could confidently say that they do. You know, they seem to be able to provide their knowledge, they're able to provide their skills. Again, the only thing is that we just have to make sure that we can just get some more, and that's up to us to add into the assessment. Okay, what we'll do is I'll get you to sign this form. We can leave it at that. I just want to thank you for your time, and I just want, basically, we just have to get these forms all signed up to acknowledge that you've participated in this validation assessment, and we can follow this up in a couple of weeks and see where we go from there. Okay?
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danica.